Okay, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mangg. Welcome back to Hanging with Mangg. And today we're playing some Monster Hunter World. Not for any real particular reason, just felt like playing some Monster Hunter World recently. It's been a while. And, you know, because I kind of stepped away from this game for a while after the PC release, and before the PC release, so there's some monsters that I haven't really encountered much. Devil Joe, I mean, he wasn't new to me or anything, but in Monster Hunter World, he was pretty new to me. So I killed him a bunch of times, got his weapon and some armor and all that good shit. I wanted to do the big golden monster, Kulve Taroth, because I still have yet to fight him. But I don't know why they're doing this thing where he goes away for a while and then he comes back, and it's just like, just have him there, ready to fight. Why do we need to make it always an event? So he's gone now. I can't fight him until January 3rd. So hopefully I'm still playing Monster Hunter World on January 3rd. And then there's Lunastra, who I have fought. I did fight, I think on the PS4. I don't actually know if it's even on PC yet. I think so. And then finally, the big really the reason I wanted to get back into it was Behemoth, the Final Fantasy crossover monster. And yeah, he is a fucking behemoth. I have yet to kill him. It's really not something you're going to do solo unless you're really good at the game. So I've been doing just like, you know, with groups. And I've yet to kill him, and I feel like it's always my fault. I think I have just like shitty armor. I think my gear is just not... I mean, obviously I'm not good, but I seem to get one shot more than anyone else, even if they get hit by the same attack. So I think my defense is not where it needs to be, and I'm just being stupid. But I really want to kill him because you can make a really sweet insect glaive, which is what I'm using now. I like it. The Guy Bulg, and you can make some armor, and I'll show you the armor if you haven't seen it. The Draken set. Look at that. Look at that fucking dragoon sexiness. That's what I want. I want to be a dragoon. God damn it. So that I gotta kill Behemoth a bunch of times. And, it's gonna be tricky. I feel like I've fucked up a few groups because of how shitty I am. Or at least my gear is shitty. But yeah, he's big and mean and dangerous, and it's definitely the hardest fight so far in this game. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. But aside from that, I just don't have a lot of money. Anyways, so that's what's been going on with Monster Hunter. If you didn't hear, there is a big expansion coming out later in 2019. It's quite a ways off, I think. Called Iceborne, and it's going to be all ice related, and there's going to be new monsters and like G rank monsters, and it's going to be awesome. We're going to do a whole series on it, I'm sure. Yeah. I don't even know what I want to do. So this week was, of course, Christmas. Mm-hmm. Christmas was good. Cannot complain about Christmas. I gave away a lot more than I got, which is the sign that you're an adult. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed, sharing the YouTube money with people. Giving my parents a beautiful 75-inch TV was just great. They were just completely shocked, and they love it, so that's great. And I got my sister's family an air hockey table on recommendation of my mom and my sister. They were like, yeah, get an air hockey table, that'd be so awesome. But it turns out that my brother-in-law really does not want an air hockey table in his house and just doesn't want to deal with the whole hassle. So they ended up returning it and using the money to buy a new TV, which they all like. So, okay. As for me, all I really got was, well, one of the best things I got was a couple Hulk pictures. My sister got a couple prints, posters of like retro Hulk stuff. Like one is just a poster of the cover of the Hulk's sort of second premiere comic. So after he got his own series after Tales to Astonish, he got a new premiere thing that's the Incredible Hulk. And so my sister thought it was the original, which it's not, because the original has the Gray Hulk. But this, I think, looks a little better, and I'm very happy to have it. And then the other one she got me was like, holy shit. I'm getting a little bit of lag, because I'm streaming. The other one is more like a compilation. It's got like 9 different little frames of some Hulk comic retro stuff. So that looks great as well. I was really shy. I did not ask for it. I did not expect it. I think maybe months ago I mentioned, like, you know, it'd be awesome is some like retro Hulk stuff for my room. But I didn't expect anyone to follow through on that. So that was great. Very happy to have that. But really the main gift that I got was vinyls, which I think I had talked about. I got a turntable and a bunch of vinyls, and I think at this point I probably bought more for myself than I got. But I've got a nice little collection now. It's definitely a very easy hobby to spend money on, because it's just like, oh, what if I get this album, then this album, and then this album? And I've been listening to a lot more music this week. The one that I really wanted, you know, that started this whole vinyl thing for me was a Jim Croce album. And so I put it on my Amazon wish list. It was right at the top. I was like, this is like really the only one I really want. But unfortunately, that's the only one I didn't get, because it was out of stock, which kind of makes me happy. It's like, okay, other people are buying Jim Croce. That makes me happy, but, you know, I wanted it. So I've got it on back order now. I'm sure I'll get it eventually, but yeah, that was a bit of a bummer. But I'm buying, you know, I'm buying some albums that are just sort of my favorite albums to listen through, which isn't that many. There aren't that many that I enjoy, like, every song on them. Oh my god. I'm really shocked I died that easily. I just did the quest with 2 tempered Beetlejuices, and it was not that bad. I don't know what happened. So yeah, I've got some albums that I just like listening all the way through. And then also I'm buying a bunch of instrumental albums, movie soundtracks, video game soundtracks, things like that. Partly because that's where, like, every RPG night now, or board game night, we're just going to be listening to some vinyls. And so I've got, like, I bought on Mondo Tees or whatever.com. They have a bunch of vinyls, exclusive stuff. And so I got the Castlevania Rondo of Blood and Castlevania Dracula X soundtracks. It's like a double vinyl thing, and so it came with both of them. It's gorgeous. Like, the records themselves look gorgeous. Everything, like, it looks amazing, and Castlevania has such good music. So the other day we were playing Kingsport Festival, which is sort of a Lovecraftian Euro board game that I finally cracked open because I did a reading of the festival. And so through the whole thing we were listening to just some Castlevania music, and it was awesome. I've also got, I ordered Carpenter Brute, who is sort of an 80s retro wave musician, artist, whatever, and it sounds awesome. Very good album. I just recently discovered him, and I was like, I gotta get this, because I wanted Mega Drive. That's like my favorite retro wave, whatever type stuff. Love Mega Drive, but they don't have any vinyls that I could find. So then I wanted maybe Perturbator, who's also really good, but the prices were just, I don't know. But Carpenter Brute is also really good, and the prices were reasonable, so I was like, okay, that's good enough. I've also got the Hollow Knight soundtrack on the way. Very excited about that. That's going to be awesome. Because I just found out, I was talking about this the other day, and Thomas had just beaten Hollow Knight. I didn't even know he was interested in that shit. But he's like, oh yeah, I just beat that today, or whatever. And I'm like, holy shit, and he loved it, of course. It's fucking Hollow Knight. I keep trying to get Ziggy to play it. I keep telling my brother to play it. Everyone should play Hollow Knight. It's amazing. But yeah, so that soundtrack's going to be awesome. And I have the Doom soundtrack on the way. The new Doom, which should be pretty kick-ass. And I got, like, a Star Wars trilogy soundtrack. It was really, like, some of these albums are pretty damn cheap. So that one was just like, it's Star Wars music for Stars Without Number. It's cheap. I'm going to get it. But for my birthday, I think I'm going to ask for, there's like, they have these vinyl sets for each of the Lord of the Rings movies. So each movie has its own 6-record set. And so right now Fellowship of the Ring is like completely sold out. It's going on Amazon for like $700 from scalpers or whatever. But I'll take the Return of the King soundtrack, absolutely. Maybe I shouldn't do something with other people because I'm just gonna fuck them over. Oh, here we go. We can slay Teostra. Isn't this where Lunastra gets introduced? Maybe. So yeah, the first day that I got the turntable on Christmas, and I set it up with some like $100 Edifier speakers that were really recommended. And I set it up, and I just put on some records, and I wouldn't go so, like, I wouldn't say it was, like, transcendent or anything like that. Like, you've never heard music until you, like, no, it's definitely not like that. But it sounded really good. And maybe that's just, like, a placebo or something like that. But pretty much everyone there thought it sounded really good. And so, you know, I have a Spotify Premium account. I use it often. But yeah, there is something sort of different about vinyls and just listening to an album all the way through and, you know, physically holding music like that and switching it out, and yeah. You know, I'm not enough of an audiophile to be like, well, you can't listen to music unless it's on the truest format or, you know, lost, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know. Ow. Ow. Okay. But I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Like I said, I've been listening to a lot of music this week. Anyways. So if you watch Roll Mangg from now on, you'll probably be hearing some vinyls. Moving on. So, this week on this channel, we had Monster Boy. I thought it would be done by now. Honestly, I thought it would be done. The game is surprisingly lengthy, especially considering how much stuff I'm sort of skipping. Like, I'm really not doing any extra content whatsoever. But the game is long. I think maybe 1 or 2 more parts, possibly 1, depending on how much... I think people are probably getting a little tired of it. The view counts aren't amazing, so I might just cram it all into one video and be done with it. Just an hour and a half or something, but... yeah, we're gonna finish it this week, guaranteed. Guaranteed. Aside from that, there's Final Fantasy XII, which is gonna pluck along for a while. Okay, I definitely didn't want to go that way, but alright. And I think this week I'll put out my top 10 games of 2018. I like to do that every year because I play a lot of video games. So that should be interesting. What's gonna be my number 1? What could it be? Very good year in gaming. Very good. So, yeah. That's pretty much it. Not much else to say. This week on the Exploring series, we had the Yule Man as my Christmas SCP special. I think some people expected me to do like a Christmas SCPs video, like I did for Halloween. But, you know, I thought the Yule Man deserved his own video. And it turns out that this last week, everyone started talking about the Yule Man. Like, it was all over the SCP subreddit. People were mentioning it in Discord a bunch and stuff, and it's just like, everyone is interested in the Yule Man. There were all these drawings coming up. And unfortunately, most of the drawings were bad. Not my style, not bad. They were not my style. There's a difference. There's a big difference. And so I couldn't really use them, so it was kind of tricky to come up with pictures for the video. I think I might have talked about all of this last time. But then, for the actual Christmas special was my reading of the festival, which I thought turned out very well, and a lot of people enjoyed, so I was very happy with that whole thing. It didn't get as many views as an SCP video, of course, but that was to be expected. Ow! Ow! And yeah, you know, I kind of hope to do more SCP readings, not SCP, Lovecraft readings in the future. Because a lot of them don't have that much dialogue, if any, which is a lot easier for me. Because voices can go horribly wrong. Especially, like, when Lovecraft writes dialogue, it's often, like, old, rambling, drunk characters that speak in, like, half sentences and half words, and it's just like, oh, God. You know, Shadow over Innsmouth with Zadok is just a fucking mess. I don't know if I'd ever want to read that. But, yeah, you know, it was a nice little video I could put out, and a lot of people enjoyed it, so. And the thing is, like, I'm not that stupid sometimes. I know that YouTube is probably not going to last forever. And I need to have, like, a backup. You know. And maybe by the time YouTube is done, or I'm done with YouTube, or, you know, whatever happens, I have enough fame, perhaps, or my name carries some sort of weight that I can easily pivot into something similar. But aside from that, you know, I don't have a college degree, and I'm not really building much of a resume aside from YouTube. So my best hope then is something similar with, like, voice acting or narration of some type. And so if I can build up, like, a portfolio of audiobooks or something like that, and I can say, look, you know, here's what I can do, here's evidence, I've done it, that would be better than having nothing than just silly videos of me playing video games. Or something, I don't know. You know, when I'm 50, I'm still gonna have to make money, and I don't know if YouTube will exactly exist for another 20-some years. But maybe it will. Maybe I'll do the exploring series until the day I die. What was I talking about? Anyways. So this week, then, I worked on a video on SCP-354, the Red Pool, which was my favorite SCP for a long time. So that was finally nice to cover. And I think it turned out... well, I didn't think it was that incredible. Because I'm worried something's really lost in summarization. You know, whenever I do these exploration logs, like, that's a big part of the appeal, is, like, hearing basically all the little monologues for the character writing the log. And when I summarize, you don't really get that. So, I don't know. I'm hoping people will like it, because usually I'm not accurate with my assessments. But we'll see. Then I'm working on, for the other video this week, it's going to be on SCP-1048. Which is the Builder Bear. Which is a cute little teddy bear that does some pretty monstrous things. So, I guess it's sort of been a theme lately of me covering things that should be really innocent and nice and are fucked up because SCP is fucked up. So, yeah, well, it's a pretty popular SCP. It's been suggested a bunch of times. So that's that. I'm throwing in a tale, and I'm not even going to summarize the tale. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the whole thing. Because I think summarization would really ruin the entire point of it. It needs to be read. So, I'm going to read it. And then, you know, soon, very soon, we're going to be looking at some polls to look at some other series that I can start diving into, maybe every week or so. And truth be told, I'm really not... well, I could definitely keep doing 2 SCP videos a week for a while. For a little while. Like, it is not at that point where I'm struggling to come up with stuff. But I know there's plenty of people that want stuff besides SCP once in a while. And even though I'm going to suffer some view hits, because they're not going to get as many views, believe me. They're well, no, I don't know that. At least at first, they're not going to get as many views. I'm almost certain. But we've got to start, you know, building this audience for the Exploring series, not just for Exploring SCP. So that won't be this week, but it will probably be next week. You know, now that we're going to be in January, the ad rates plummet quite a bit, by about 50%, maybe even 60%. Sort of depends on the channel, I guess. I've been pretty fortunate with advertisers, so I think it's about 50% for me. So, in some ways, it matters almost more now to get better views, so you can compensate, but I really just wanted to get as many views as possible in the last few months, so you can sort of just save up for the winter, stock up for the winter. Yeah, so that's pretty much where it's all at as we head into the new year with over 200,000 subscribers, and right now I'm making about 15,000 subscribers a month. which is, that's like 180,000 subscribers a year. If I kept that pace, that would be amazing. That would be absolutely amazing to do 180 per year. Because looking at that way, it's like, okay, a million's doable. You know, it takes time. It takes a few years, but unless you're Jack Black, you're not getting 1 million subscribers in a week. Which, that in itself is kind of ridiculous. He uploaded like one 30-second video, and now he's got 1 million subscribers. Probably a lot more now. He hasn't done anything. It's just... But he has done a lot, hasn't? It's not just like some random asshole. It's Jack Black. A lot of people like him. I did not subscribe to him because it's like, you know, he hasn't done anything on YouTube yet. Once he starts making some videos, maybe I'll check him out. But anyways, so yeah, 2018 was a great year. Very, very good year. And I'm hoping 2019 will be even better, because I thought 2017 was an amazing year. Well, you can't top 2017. I'm speaking, of course, of YouTube alone, of the exploring. Nothing else. Nothing else. But, yeah, I thought 2017 was very good for the exploring series, and then, boom, we topped it. By quite a bit. So, basically my goal for 2019 is to get a new house. That's the goal. That is the dream. Will it be possible? I don't know. I don't know. It depends on a lot of factors. You know, SCP is doing me right. I'm very happy about it, but will it be enough? I'm not exactly an incredibly creative YouTuber. You know, at this point with the Exploring series, I'm not trying out all sorts of new formats and things like that. Which, you know, maybe it's too early to discuss stuff like that, and I just stick with what works and it's paying the bills. We'll see if that's enough. I can't complain. Oh, this is gonna suck. Dead. Oh, I didn't die. Look at that. Moving on then. So like I said, we played Kingsport Festival this week. We actually played a new board game that I had to learn the rules for. We haven't done that in a long time. But we got together on Thursday. We didn't have Ziggy. We didn't have Studs. And so there were 4 of us. Cosmic Encounter was out. We needed a board game. I was like, I'm going to grab something new we haven't played. And I thought Kingsport Festival is perfect. Because I just did a reading of the festival. There's no more opportune time. I've had this game for like 3 years just sitting on a shelf, waiting to be played. Now is the time. And it was decent. I'm not going to say it was crap or anything like that. I don't know when we'll ever play it again, because at this point we have so many games that we wouldn't mind playing again. It was a Euro game that it was a competitive Euro game where everyone played as a cultist, and you were in Kingsport, and you were trying to like summon great old ones every turn. You were invoking them every turn using dice rolls, and you had to decide which one you were going to summon to get the best benefit. And then you were like spreading your influence across Kingsport to get different benefits. And basically, it was just like, it was a who can get the most points. But it had a cool theme, so that helped. God damn it. So yeah, you know, we listened to some Castlevania music, we played some Kingsport Festival. It was a good night. It was a good night. I can't complain. Yeah, Stars Without Number would have been better, but it was better than just sitting around. So, we did not play Stars Without Number this week because Monday was, well, it was all Christmas shit. So there's no role manging this week, but I did play an RPG. What? What? That's right. I played an RPG. So, I mentioned a while back how I wanted to do something for Christmas where I played a game of D&D or something with family members on or around Christmas to get kids and stuff into D&D because it's a great hobby. And that actually didn't end up panning out because Christmas is just too insane. There's just too many people going. It's too hectic. It just doesn't work. Christmas is not a relaxing time, god damn it. And I was just really concerned that we had too many kids and not enough adults to sort of balance it out. I could have handled a couple kids if the rest were adults, but this was like 4 kids, 2 adults, and it was just like, I don't know. These kids are all snot-nosed punks, and they're just going to piss me off, and it's just not going to work. So we decided against it. But, as I mentioned, I played an RPG this week. That was pretty badass. We decided, let's nix all the kids, because kids are shit. Kids suck. And let's just play with some adults after Christmas, like a few days later. And so we got together yesterday. It was my sister, her husband, my mom, and my aunt. So all adults, none of which are nerdy people whatsoever. But they all played a few modern board games. So that helps. That helps quite a bit. And at first I was like, okay. My first thought was Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. I was like, well, you know, that's what people start with. But then I was like, well, is it the best though? Because it's not what I play. Not anymore. I've moved on. And is it actually the best game to start with among all the myriad of role-playing games out there? Is Dungeons & Dragons still the one to start with? And so I thought about Dungeon World. I was like, well, Dungeon World's very entertaining, and it would get them on the right foot to begin with, where instead of thinking about statistics and mechanics and character sheets, they're thinking about the fiction. You know, fiction first, the narrative. And they're not bound by any, you know, mechanics per se. Limited mechanics. Because, you know, what I thought when I first played Dungeon World is this is what D&D should be. And so I thought about it, and I thought about it. And I thought it would be probably easier mechanically for them to play, I think. Because these are not like video game players where they're thinking with really video game mindset. So I think they would take to Dungeon World's sort of free-form narrative a little better from moment to moment. However, Dungeon World lends itself to a more sandbox style of gameplay where the players have more agency within the story. which is great for experienced players, such as myself. That's part of why I really like Dungeon World. It's encouraged to be a bit more sandboxy. And, you know, the players help build the world. But for absolute first-time players that aren't really video game players and don't have any experience with role-playing games, I think it would be to their detriment to have that sort of openness. They're going to sit around and the campaign is basically going to putter out unless I really just force feed some plot, which is not how Dungeon World is meant to work. And so for a little while I was going to go with Dungeon World, and then I was like, I think it'll just be easier on everyone. Despite me not liking it as a player, I think it is the best for this group, for me DMing, to go with a pre-written D&D campaign. That was my thought. And so we ended up going with the D&D starter set, using the Lost Mines of Phandelver adventure, which is designed, apparently, for first-time players. This is people that have never heard of D&D. This is what they're supposed to buy, the starter set. This is what they're supposed to run. Now, it's benefited by me being experienced with role-playing games, so I'm not clueless as a DM, and I can improvise a little bit better, which did end up helping. But I had to move away from my thoughts of, well, I wouldn't like playing this. You know, I wouldn't want to do this. This is too railroady. This is too basic, and it's not my. I don't like D&D. Blah blah blah. It's like I can't think like that. I have to think like these people that have never, like literally, they did not even know what Dungeons and Dragons was going to be like. They all said afterwards, they're like, I didn't know Dungeons and Dragons was like this. Like, they had no clue. They didn't even know that miniatures normally were involved. And I thought that was going to be a concern, because I didn't want to use miniatures at all. I wanted to get them right in the theater of mind. That was going to be it, because that's really all you need. I didn't want to involve miniatures at all. But I thought, like, oh, maybe they'd seen, like, Stranger Things or something like that. They've seen shows or whatever. They've, you know, they're supposed to be miniatures you move around. I was worried. They had no clue about that. So, yeah. So we went with the starter set, which also benefits. It's also really good because I did not want to do character creation. That would have been awful. So it comes with pre-generated characters. But what's even better, really almost the best part, is that the pre-generated characters all are given backstories and personal goals that tie into the Lost Mines of Phandelver. So each one has sort of a personal goal that leads them into like a side quest in the Lost Mines of Phandelver, in the adventure. And so it's not required for me to like have some serendipitous encounter where they meet with someone and then they tell them, oh, you should go here, there's a dragon over here, blah blah blah. It's like, no, the human fighter's personal goal as part of his backstory is to go slay the dragon. And so there's an impetus to keep going, and there's always something for them to continue doing. So there's no lag in like, what do we do? I don't know what to do. It's like, no, you look at your personal goals. Like, my character wants to go here and slay these orcs, or rescue this person and get revenge, or slay this dragon. It's like each of them has something that they can keep working towards for a while, which is great. I was very happy about that. Let's do this. So I sat them down and I started explaining Dungeons and Dragons. And it's like, what is the best way to summarize this game to people that have no clue whatsoever what is about to happen? And it's like, I know no matter what I say, it's not going to be complete. And there's going to be a learning curve, a learning experience here. And so basically I was like, Dungeons and Dragons is about creating a story. You know, you're not trying to win. I'm not trying to win. I'm not like an adversary. We're all here to create a story. And I'm going to set up situations and encounters and the world, and you're going to respond to that, and then I'm going to respond to you, and we go back and forth, and that's the game, which really was not the best explanation, because again, they had no clue how this was going to play out. Like, you're not just sitting there and talking back and forth, not really. You know, you're playing in a world. Like I said, there's no way that I could really think of to explain this that would be... Oh, I was supposed to kill Grey Jagras. That would be really perfectly making them understand. It wouldn't work. But I explained all the dice. I showed them all, each the different dice. And I explained that, you know, normally we're just going to be basically having a conversation. But anytime the result of an action is uncertain, that's when we roll the dice. So whether you're trying to attack somebody, or shoot a spell, or climb a cliff, or persuade somebody, or bluff your way past a door guard, anytime the result is uncertain, that's when the dice are going to be involved. And that's basically it. And so I handed out all the character sheets. I had 6 character sheets. The starter set only comes with 5. And there was a chance that we had 6 players, although it was very slim, but I wanted to be prepared just in case. And so I needed another character sheet, but luckily other people have had this problem. And so I found somebody had built up a 6th character sheet for a Wood Elf Ranger that also ties into the Lost Mines. And so it has all the background and the personal goal and all that for the starter set. So this was perfect. And so I just, you know, discussed all 6 characters, and then we divided them up. And I think they made their decisions. On the one hand, you know, you're not supposed to put that much thought into it because you have no idea how things are going to work. But on the other hand, I think they made it with not full understanding, well, obviously, of exactly what was happening. They thought that every week, every time you played, it was a new game, and you picked a new character. And that was it. I didn't know that that's what they thought at the time. Later, that's what they told me. Because, like, after we finished, they were like, you get to keep the same character? And I was like, yeah, that's how it works. Because for people used to board games, that, you know, you change, you know, you can pick a new character every time you play a board game. You know, there are legacy games, but we really have not played any of those, other than my mom, who has played a bunch of Gloomhaven. Which, really, Gloomhaven is probably one of the better introductions to D&D. And so they just immediately, as soon as I had named, like, the human fighter, like, oh, this guy's a human fighter. He's a folk hero. As soon as I named that, they just slid that character sheet over to my brother-in-law, because they were like, oh, that's what he'll want to play. And he just started reading it, and he never changed, and that was it. So it's like, I don't know if that's actually what he wanted to play, but I think he's okay with it. And so they ended up going with, my sister immediately went with the Wood Elf Ranger, which was good then that I found that and printed it out. And I think I did a little bit of a disservice by sort of describing things in Lord of the Rings terms. Because we had like a halfling rogue, and I was like, oh, it's kind of like Bilbo. And then the Wood Elf Ranger, I was like, it's kind of like Legolas. And then the High Elf Wizard, I was like, it's kind of like Gandalf. You know? And it's like, but they're not. Because the rogue was actually had the criminal background. So he was a lot more rough and tumble than Bilbo. Because halflings are not really... Well, depending on the setting, they can be just like Shire hobbits. But a lot of the times they're a lot more adventurous. And really the problem though was my sister picked the Elven Ranger because she wanted to be like Legolas. Because she's a huge fan of Lord of the Rings movies. This is why I use them as examples. But the problem was she thought that she was going to be like Legolas. Meaning, she thought she was going to be doing stuff like Legolas does in the movies. Which, you know, Legolas is like a level 15 ranger or something like that. Like, you know, super, super competent and never really misses anything ever. And he's just amazing. He's sliding down stairs on shields and pulling off all these kills. And, you know, when he's killing like the Oliphants or whatever, and it's just like, oh my god. That's what she thought. And she very quickly learned that, oh, I'm not Legolas, am I? Because I'm level 1. And I think that bummed her out a little bit, but as you'll find out, we salvaged things. And so my mom went with the wizard because she wanted to be like Gandalf. Again, you're level 1, but even aside from that, Gandalf is really not a stereotypical wizard. You know, he's like a primordial spirit, really. You know, people call him a wizard. He accepts that, but he's not really the stereotypical Dungeons and Dragons wizard. So it really was not the best example. And so that was the starting roster then. We had a human fighter who was really good with the bow, because the starter set comes with 2 fighters. One's good with a great axe and one's good with a bow. And it's a little bit of a bummer because I think he, as the bow fighter, was actually a better archer than the ranger. Because he starts with fighting style archery, which gives him a +2 attack bonus to using bows, whereas the ranger doesn't get that until level 2, I think. And so he was actually a little bit better, but you know, these are not min-maxers, they don't really mind. So the human fighter with the bow, the elven ranger with a bow, the halfling rogue who also had a bow, and the elven wizard who had spells. So you'll notice something there is that none of them really are geared towards melee combat, which is fine. It's just honestly not what I expected to end up with. Because I thought at least one of them would be, you know, have the big hulking great axe. But again, I think they really didn't comprehend everything that was going on, and they just immediately slid that fighter character sheet over to my brother-in-law. And so I think I shouldn't have named that one first. I should have read the one with the great axe, and then he would have been the great axe guy. So it's a little bit of a bummer, but I think it's fine. It works out. It's not like the... It's not like the bow fighter doesn't have a weapon. He actually has a great sword. But because he has fighting style archery, it's almost always better for him to use his bow. Except that I made things very easy on them. I think it's just, there's no reason to punish these people on their first time playing. So I made things very easy on them, and really he should have had disadvantage on his attack rolls anytime that he used his bow in melee range, which he did a few times. I decided to waive that for this session. Next time when we start, I'll tell him. And it's like, you know, you really don't want to use a ranged weapon in melee combat. It's not a good idea. And also, I need to double check the rules for like readying weapons and things like that. I really just hand-waved the whole thing and just, they always had whatever weapon they wanted ready. And they never switched weapons in combat, so that never became a problem. But next time I want to make sure of how that works. Because I haven't played D&D in a while, and I definitely haven't run it in a long while. So anyways, I had them all read their backgrounds and their personal goals. I wanted them to all be clear on what that information was, and I wanted to make them understand that it was important. In a board game, that's what you'd call fluff, and it doesn't really matter one way or another most of the time for playing the board game and winning the board game. But I wanted them to understand that we're building a story, and your character has an important place in the story, and thus their background information, their goals, and their desires are all important to the story. So they all read that, and I think that actually did help. I think it did help, because throughout the session, they did surprise me sometimes by making references to their backgrounds, their goals, their flaws, things like that. They started to roleplay. Haha. But after that, we finally got started. And so, you know, I was going through the introduction. The introduction is very basic and straightforward and railroady. If you've never done Lost Mines, basically, it's just the crew of players are hired by a dwarf friend of theirs to escort some supplies to a nearby frontier town called Phandalin. And so they hitch up on a wagon. The dwarf goes off ahead of them with a human warrior that he's befriended or whatever. And they go off ahead, and so it's just the players and the wagon on the road to Phandalin. And so the book suggests, on the road, that the players should come up with a reason for why their character knows this dwarf, Gundren. And I read that and I was like, this is gonna be rough, but I'm gonna have them try. And I was like, this is really just an exercise in imagination. But I want you to think of a reason of why your character would know Gundren. And I mean, this is first time role players that are not nerds almost whatsoever. But I was pleasantly surprised. They all came up with a reason that was plausible. I think, you know, my mom playing... Oh, they also all came up with names. So, my sister, the ranger, came up with Mason, which is not an elven name, but okay, maybe he had some human influence. My brother-in-law, the fighter, was Arturo, which is perfectly acceptable. I mean, yeah, you can come up with a lot worse than that. My aunt playing the halfling came up with Bree, which was interesting because, you know, my sister even mentioned this. Like, Bree is the village, the town near the Shire, populated by humans and hobbits and stuff. And so my aunt did not know that. She just happened to pick this name. But I thought that's a fine name. And then my mom really did the worst here. She was like, well, I'm just going to be called Gandalf. And I'm like, you can't be called Gandalf. I was like, please, for the love of God, come up with something other than Gandalf. Like, even if you change it just a tiny bit, it's more acceptable. Like, Bandolf. And so she's like, okay, I'll be Bandolf. And I'm like, oh, God. And my sister was originally just going to be Legolas. I'm like, oh, I'll be Legolas, you be Gandalf. And I'm like, no, just, come on. Come on. We're not starting off this way. And I know, I just ripped off the name Artemis completely. Like, there's no doubt about it. I didn't change it at all. I ripped off the name and the character. I know. But that's at least, like, a bit more obscure in fantasy terms. Calling your first character Gandalf and Legolas is just... it's too much. It's too much. So that's when she switched to Mason and she went with Bandolf. I was like, alright, we can go with this. So my mom, for her reason for why she knows Gundren, she was really thinking like Gandalf at this point. And so she was like, well, I know a bunch of hobbits, and that I was introduced to the dwarf through the hobbits. And it was like... she's thinking in some sort of D&D, or in some sort of Lord of the Rings way, which honestly makes that story make less sense. But in D&D, that's somewhat plausible, because it's not Lord of the Rings. Okay. Like, I applauded her for coming up with something. Like, it's better than nothing. Like, okay, you have a backstory there. That's how you know. You're a friend of the halflings. Fine. My sister was like... my sister, her character's personal goal was getting revenge on a big clan of orcs that, like, wiped out her tribe or something, or her clan, or whatever. Whatever the elves call it. And so she had found this dwarf that was willing to sort of help her find the orc clan that wiped out her family or whatever. So she's tying her backstory into it that's on her sheet, which was fine. That's encouraged. So I thought that was good. She's really focused on this personal goal, which is going to be good in the future. My brother-in-law just said that he's been working the docks for a while, and that's how he met Gundren. Because Gundren has been shipping things in or something like that. He came up with a very basic one, and I fleshed it out a little bit. But just the fact, like, just coming up with something original as part of a story, that's a big step that these people have never taken before. So that in itself is enough at the very beginning. And my aunt said that she used to live in Phandalin, which might have been implied in her backstory. I'm not exactly sure. I think it was. So she used to live in Phandalin. She got into some legal trouble because she's a criminal. And when she went to Neverwinter, that's where she found Gundren, and he's sort of been helping her out as a friend. And so there you go. They all came up with a reason that they know Gundren. And so we continued on, and very soon they came to a blockade in the road where they found 2 dead horses. And so they decided that they saw arrows sticking out of the horses, and they were like, well, there must have been an ambush. And so my sister immediately charged into the thicket nearby, because on the opposite side of the roads there were thickets and trees. I charge into the thicket and find whatever's there. And the book says, like, you know, this is a goblin ambush. This is the first combat that people are ever supposed to do. And it's like, the book's like, the characters cannot surprise the goblins, but it's possible that the goblins will surprise the characters. And I was like, fuck that. This ranger just fucking surprised these goblins. Like, because that was her first action ever, was to just sprint into the thicket. Like, yeah, these goblins are a little surprised. I allowed it. And so she finds, you know, 2 goblins in there, one with a bow and one with, like, a nasty-looking blade. And she's right in front of this goblin with a blade. And so they all got very excited. They all got very excited, and they started shouting out things and orders and things they wanted to do. And I was like, hold on. There's an order to these things. There's rules. Because you immediately get blasted with some rules now that you go into combat. And I was like, okay, it's her turn. She gets to do something here. And before I even described, like, you know, the action mechanics of a turn in combat, she was like, I shoot the one with the bow, and then I grab the knife from the guy and stab him in the neck. And I was like, holy shit. I would love for you to be able to do all that. And if this was Dungeon World, you probably could. And I was like, oh, maybe I should have gone with Dungeon World. But no, I've made the decision. We're here. And so I'm like, okay, unfortunately, you can't do all that. Basically, on your turn, you get 1 move and 1 action. I explained actions and blah, blah, blah. And so they were very disappointed that they could only do 1 attack per turn. And this persisted for, like, a couple hours, where they were just like, okay, but I want to attack the other one now. And I was like, no, 1 attack per turn. That's it. I don't think you get an extra attack until, like, level 5 or something. So she's like, okay, I'll shoot the one with the bow. Which is a little questionable. There's a goblin with a knife right in front of her. But, you know, it's not my place. I'm like, okay, she attacks the one with the bow. I'm like, okay, roll the d20 and add your attack bonus. It's all on your sheet, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, throughout the entire session, most people had trouble finding the attack bonuses on their sheets. I did not think it was that complicated, but I guess I didn't point things out properly. I will take the blame. And so she rolls her first d20 ever in life. And of course, it's a 1. I'm like, okay, now I will explain critical failures. And I was like, you know, normally I'd have the bow break or they shoot themselves or something ridiculous. But it's like, I don't want to be, this is the first roll ever. I don't want to be too harsh here. So I was like, okay, you pull the bow back a bit too far in your haste or something like that, and you hear it crack a little. You know, it's not broken, but if you make a mistake like that again, it might break. I was like, I don't want to be too harsh, but I want to be clear that rolling a 1 is different than just missing. You know, something bad happens. Rolling a 20 is really good. And it took a while, but I did eventually roll a 1 on my side. I never flubbed it. But I did eventually roll a 1 for one of the goblins later on. And I was like, here's how critical failures can benefit you on the enemy side. And so I think I had a goblin, like, shoot another goblin in the back. So I was not as kind to the goblins. How the fuck do I get to this Anjanath? I hate the ancient forest. So she horribly misses, and she's like, okay, I'm running away. I'm running away. And at first I thought she was just going to run away forever. But she's like, I run back to the wagon. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, it's an important rule. I can't skip over it just because we just started, but I have to explain attacks of opportunity. Because it does come up a lot in D&D. It just happens. So I have to explain it. And it just it's a bummer because you know, she just missed her first attack horribly and her bow's breaking and blah blah blah. And this is at the point where she realizes that she's not Legolas. But when you move out of a character's threat range, if they have a melee weapon or something, they can get a free attack on you. And so the goblin swiped at her with his blade, and he did nick her. He did hit her. So she's running away, she's bleeding, her bow's breaking. This was not her happiest moment of the session. So we continued the combat, and people started learning how to do attack rolls and things like that. And my mom, for some reason, decided that what she wanted to do in combat was move the horses. Move the horse carcasses so that they could keep moving in with the wagon. I would say in some fights, potentially, it wouldn't be the worst idea. If there were enough combatants involved, and the horses weren't in a perfectly clear line of sight. But in this situation, no, it was one of the dumber things she could have done. But it's not my place to say that, and so she wanted to try moving the horses as a elven wizard. So she got to learn how to do a strength check. She didn't do too well. And this is where we were. She moved a horse like 5 feet. And she's like, give me 6 feet. And I'm like, this is not a negotiation. No, 5 feet. So the fight continues, and they do eventually kill all the goblins. Everyone gets a kill except for Bandolf, I think. And I messed up a little bit because the fourth goblin is actually supposed to get away, so that they follow him to the goblin cave. But the Arturo had the goblin like dead to rights. He was pointing an arrow in his face, and he just shot him in the face. And I was like, okay, I don't know how I'll flub this, so alright, he kills it. I'll just throw in a fifth goblin that was hiding, and he starts running away. So, you know, the goblin runs away, and they were like, well, why do we care? And so it's like, oh, the horses, while you were moving them, you noticed that they definitely are the horses that belong to Gundren and his human companion. You know this. And you also see that the saddlebags have been looted, and there's an empty map case lying nearby. And so they start talking about it. And Arturo runs over and sees the little goblin running down the path away from them. And so they're like, should we go after the goblin? Do we care? Blah, blah, blah. Should we just take these goods and go sell them? And they were thinking very... What's the term I'm looking for? Selfishly? That's not really it, though. They weren't thinking of it as, like, a story. They were thinking of, how do we win, you know? And winning for them, apparently, was, how do we get the most money? And so I told them that Gundren was the one who was going to be paying them, which was actually false. And what I should have said was Gundren was their friend. I needed to appeal to them emotionally, and I did not. So I told them Gundren was the one who was going to pay them, but they decided that these goods were worth more than that, and they were just going to sell them. I think they changed their minds on that a little bit later, because they actually ended up delivering the goods. And so they decided, yeah, not to go after Gundren, because they didn't want to risk it. There was nothing of benefit to them, because they didn't really think about Gundren as their friend at all. And so they moved the horses, and they continued on their way. And the book does say this is a possibility, and, you know, it's not that big of a deal. There's definitely ways to rectify this. Oh my god, I've been talking for 1 hour and 16 minutes. Holy shit. I have so much more to say. I'm sorry, it was a very interesting session, because this has literally never happened before where I've DM'd for all new players. So this was very... I could have probably done in my own video on this. But they went to Phandalin. And this is where my aunt remembered that she had trouble in Phandalin. And so she didn't want to be seen. The people she had trouble with were the local gang, the Red Brands, which are actually a big part of sort of the chapter 2 of the adventure. Their goal is eventually to wipe out the Red Brands. So it's okay that she's in trouble with them, but she thought she just didn't want to be seen in town. So she was hiding in the wagon, and they went to the local trading post, and they ended up delivering the goods in the wagon, and they got paid, so they got their money. And they were thinking about what to do next. And so they wanted to find Gundren, because they did not really necessarily believe that Gundren was abducted by the goblins. They thought maybe the goblins had attacked him and he had ran away and ran to Phandalin. And so they went to the local inn, but my aunt didn't want to go to the inn because she didn't want to be seen. So she realized that in her background, she has an aunt that lives in Phandalin, that runs a farm there. And so she thought, I'll just go stay with her while you guys go to the inn. And I was like, this is very good. I did not expect them to remember these parts of their backstory this well and to integrate them. So I was very pleased with that. Basically, I had the lowest expectations for these players. So they continued to surprise me. And so they go to the inn, they ask her, they get like some ale and some food, and they ask around about Gundren, and they find out that he hasn't been seen in a long time. And I'm just trying to sort of confirm their suspicions that Gundren has definitely been kidnapped by goblins. But they find out that Gundren has a couple brothers that have been camped outside of town for a while, although they haven't been seen in a while either. So they all meet up with my aunt's aunt, and they spend the night there. They have a good meal and blah, blah, blah. And the aunt also mentions how she hasn't seen Gundren, and he has a couple brothers that are camping outside of town. And so they're like, well, let's go try and find these brothers. And I'm like, this is unexpected. The book is not really super prepared for this at this point, but I'm going to roll with it. I'm not going to say, no, don't do this. And so they start looking, and I have them roll like a nature roll. And they don't roll too well, so I'm like, it takes a long time, most of the day, but eventually you do find a trail, and it leads you to an encampment. And so I had to skip to the last chapter of the adventure, Wave Echo Cave, where they find a body of a dead dwarf and a ruined camp. And I'm like, yeah, you see the dead dwarf, and he's right in front of the mouth of a tunnel or something like that. And so they go into the mountain. And in the mountain, they go down a rope, and they start poking around, and suddenly they're attacked by 10 sturges. Giant mosquitoes, basically, if you don't know. With, like, bulbous heads, and yeah, they look real nasty. And there's 10 of them, and I'm like, oh gosh, this is going to be a massacre. Because they're getting ambushed by these things. Well, not really. They actually all noticed them, so the Sturges were not that stealthy. And so I'm like, okay, Bandolph goes first. What do you do? And this was the most impressive moment of the entire session. My mom decided to use the sleep spell. And I was very impressed. Very impressed. I would not have thought she would even read all of her spells, let alone use the best one at the perfect moment. But she used it, and she rolled really well. And so I was like, alright, you put all 10 to sleep. Now, a crueler DM may have not clumped them all into a 20-foot sphere the way that I did, but I was like, no, they're all together. You put them all to sleep at the same time, and they all plummet to the ground. It's like a 30-foot fall. I didn't look at the falling damage, but I thought it was 1d6 for every 10 feet. And I was like, I had one survive so that Arturo could just, like, coup de grace it, or coup de grace, whatever. But yeah, they eliminated all the Sturges in, like, one turn, and I was very happy. Because if you recall, I'm not the type of DM, or even really the player, that likes lengthy combat encounters. If they do something smart and it's effective, absolutely I don't mind finishing a combat encounter in one turn. You know, like, that worked. Done. They're all dead. Why drag it out for no reason whatsoever? You won. So I was very impressed. And so they moved on. They started being a little stealthy in this mountain. They found this room that had like 3 ghouls feasting on some bodies. And so they decided to actually not fight them and go around them. I was impressed with that. Because they're already learning, well, maybe discretion is the better part of valor. They don't have to kill everything they see. They continued on for a little bit, but then they were ambushed by 7 ghouls. And so my mom used Burning Hands. And I did say, like, she killed 3 of them, but I fudged that quite a bit. She didn't quite kill 3 of them, but I was like, I'm going to be generous here if they really want to fight them all. But Arturo fired an arrow into one, and he hit it. And he did damage to it, and I'm like, okay, he's hurt, but he's still moving. He's like, wait, he's not dead? Like, everything they've hit so far has died in one hit. So this was a big shock to them. And so at this point, I actually stepped in to give advice. I was like, okay, Bandolph is surrounded by ghouls, and so if you don't move in, like, between them, he's probably gonna get massacred. And so he moved in between, and so they both survived, because he's a bit more of a tank. And I was like, take note that, you know, you fired an arrow, you did good damage, and this thing didn't die, and there's a lot of them. And so they decided to flee. I didn't really want to specifically push them that way, but this is definitely way above their level. And they are not exactly experienced or smart enough to handle this without just beating everything. So they fled, and I was like, okay, you get away, you flee. They don't follow you outside of the mountain. So like, okay, that place was crazy. And they realized at this point that they were supposed to go after Gundren. And I think they metagamed a little bit here. They were like, this is too, this is too dangerous for us. We have to go after Gundren in the forest. And so they decided to go back to the starting spot, follow the Goblin Trail, and they finally got to the Goblin Cave. And they were ambushed by a couple more goblins. It took a while for them to kill them. I think my sister, like, kept on missing her shots with her bow, and she got really disheartened. Like, she was really upset. She's like, I want to be Legolas. I can't hit anything. It's like, that's dice rolls. Like, that's how it works. Again, this is why I don't love D&D, but alright. So she goes into the cave by herself, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. But the first room in the cave has a couple wolves in it. I think it's actually supposed to be 3, but only 2 are chained up or something like that, but I just changed it to 2 chained up wolves, and that's it. She got so excited when she saw these wolves. All she wanted to do was befriend them. That was it. And so she gave them, like, some rations, and I had her roll animal handling, and she rolled decently. And she also started playing a flute, which was a really bad idea, but she played the flute to sort of calm them down. And eventually she unchained the wolves. A little bit later, but... And so, it's like, a shitty DM would just have the wolves, like, eat her. But I can literally make this person's whole night and put a love of Dungeons and Dragons in her by having her befriend these wolves. It's that simple. You know, it's those, like, crucial decisions that can really change a person's perception of a game. And, you know, later on when, you know, she's more experienced, the game can be a little bit harsher. You know, you can't always cater to her all her wishes. But this was a small thing, and I'm telling you, it absolutely made the entire game for her. And she admitted it. She was like, oh man, without the wolves, the game would have been good, but oh man, I loved this game. Like, literally, it changed everything. I was like, yeah, okay. You know, they're a little bit wary, but they're not attacking you, they're not snarling at you, and they're enjoying your rations. And so they ended up killing the goblins, and they all were like, okay, they're in the wolf room. They're all a little beat up, and they're like, oh, we should rest. We should have a short rest for an hour. And my sister's like, okay, we can rest, and I'm going to keep playing my flute to calm the wolves down. And I'm like, okay. And 5 minutes later, they learned a harsh lesson here. But I'm glad they did it, because it is an important lesson to learn. This is a living world, and your actions always have consequences. So walking into a goblin cave without exploring it and making a bunch of noise is going to cause some goblins to find you. And so 5 minutes into their rest, they were ambushed by 4 goblins. This is when the critical failure happened for the goblins, so that helped. And they took down 2 goblins very quickly. And then my sister's like, okay, I'm going to take a wolf off the chain, and I'm going to sick him on the last goblin. And I'm like, okay, roll your animal handling to see if it's actually cooperative. And she rolled really well, and I was like, okay, it pounces on the goblin and rips out its throat. And she, like, was cheering. And it's like, this isn't like some big bad villain that she's min-maxing and she's getting something super powerful here by using her wolves. Because, you know, normally a ranger at level 3, they can take Beastmaster or something. And on their turn, they can give an action to a wolf. Or I don't even know if they can start with a wolf at level 3. But it's like, fuck it. Yeah, this is their first D&D session. They want to do something cool. They're going to get to do something cool. So, yeah. She was very happy. So they started exploring the cave very cautiously. They were very concerned because they thought they were very fragile. But they started exploring the cave, and Arturo actually went up a vertical shaft in the wolf room, and he found like a big furry goblin 30 feet up on like a throne room or something like that. And so he wanted to, like, everyone to go up there, and they ambushed this guy and kill him that way, because they have the sneak aspect. But my sister was like, oh, but my wolves can't go up the shaft. I can't leave my wolves. We can't do it. And so I think this upset him, because he was like, this is a perfect plan, we can just do this. But she didn't want to separate from the wolves for now. So they kept on going, they went across a bridge, and she was taking point with the wolves, and she was being stealthy, and they found a room that had like 7 goblins in it, and they found a prisoner although they couldn't find out who it was exactly. They just saw it was somebody tied up. And they were like, that's him. That's got to be him. That's Gundren. How do we do this? You know, there's 7 of them. And so they planned for a long time. And it was like, it warmed my heart to see new role players planning an encounter without just, let's kill them, and they rush in and just slaughter everything. They were planning and thinking. It was great. Their ultimate plan was a little iffy, but it did work. Their plan was to just send the halfling in, who was very stealthy, and she was just going to stealth past all the goblins and slit the one goblin's throat that was watching the prisoner, and then cut the prisoner loose and get out of there. But then they were like, oh, but he might not be in very good condition. He might not even be conscious. How are you going to get him out of there? You're just a halfling. And so they thought, okay, once you cut the guy loose, that's when we'll ambush the goblins. And we'll use sleep. And I think I wasn't thinking properly because they hadn't had a long rest since my mom used sleep and burning hands. So she actually didn't have a spell available. I did not think about it at the time. And really, it was part of a good plan. I don't know if I would have said anything anyways. It was like, okay, I'm just going to let him do it. I'm a kind DM. If they're having fun, that's really all that I care about right now. And so they're like, okay, that's the plan. We're going to put them to sleep, and then we'll kill any that are not asleep, and then we'll kill the ones that are asleep. Like, okay, this is what you're going to do. It's going to be tricky sneaking past these goblins. Because literally, this would normally almost never be possible. They were in a small, cramped room. They had a campfire. 6 goblins around the campfire means a 360-degree line of sight. I was like, this is never going to be possible. But they planned this out, and I really wanted to encourage that. I will punish them later. So I'm like, okay, you're going to have to roll really well. And lo and behold, she rolled really well. I had her roll twice to make it through the room. But she did roll really well both times. She has a +7 to stealth, which I didn't even think it was possible at level 1. But I guess if you're a rogue, that's what you're good at. So she stealthed up there. She slit the one goblin's throat. They were all very happy. And then she cut the prisoner loose. And she found it was not Gundren. It was the human that he was accompanying. And he was barely conscious. He was at like 1 HP. You know, he looked really beat up. And so like, okay, let's ambush the goblins now. And so she fired off the sleep spell. It wasn't as good, but she put 3 of them to sleep. They killed 2 more. The wolves ate another one, and then they butchered the sleeping ones, and they got out of there, and they just ran all the way out of the cave. And I was like, okay, you're out of the cave. And I thought about ending it right there. But then they were like, oh, maybe we should go kill that big furry guy. The leader, he's got to be the leader. And so I was like, I got to encourage this. So Sildar, the human, was like, I promise you 50 gold pieces if you kill the leader and stop these raids. These goblin raids. And they were like, oh, we got to go kill the leader. We're going back in. And so they talked about going up the vertical shaft to ambush him. And I was like, okay, Sildar says he'll watch your wolves for you if you go do this. And she was very reluctant, but she went along with it. So they all climbed up the vertical shaft. They didn't have any trouble. I was happy. And they all ambushed the bugbear and his 2 goblins and his wolf that were there. They ambushed him from behind, so they all had advantage on their attack rolls. I think somehow my sister still missed, so she was upset. But they killed the 2 goblins very quickly, and they just focused fired the shit out of the bugbear. They rolled really well, and they just dropped him dead, and the wolf, they just sort of intimidated, and it ran away. And I was like, there you go. You beat the big boss. And they found his treasure chest, so they got some treasure now, a bunch of money, and some healing potions, and I gave them 350 XP. So they hit level 2, and I was like, that's where we'll end for tonight. And the first thing my sister said was, why have we been playing board games this whole time and not this? And I was like, my thoughts exactly. So yeah, it turns out they all loved it. They were talking about it for a bunch, and then this morning, my mom was talking to all of them on the phone, and they were all talking about how much they liked D&D, and they were all like, when are we going to play again? When are we going to play again? And I was like, this is great. I didn't think all of them would love it. I thought my brother-in-law, who doesn't like fantasy, I thought he would not really care for it as much, but it seems he enjoyed it a lot as well. I figured my sister would like it a lot. She loves Lord of the Rings. She tends to be a little bit more creative, so I figured that would go well, but the wolves really cinched it. My mom enjoyed it, but I think she's going to switch off from a wizard. I think the wizard is a little bit too complicated for her, and it's sort of a bummer because she did really well with the wizard as far as using the sleep spell, but I don't know. She could stay as a wizard. I would be fine with it. I think she'd be fine with it, but again, if she just switched to a cleric, it would solve a lot of problems. They would have a melee fighter. They would have a healer. It's a little bit more simple. And I think she'd probably get into it a little bit more, into the character, but I don't know. We'll see. My aunt likes her thief. She likes being a rogue. She didn't like being a criminal at first, but she sort of adapted to it. The only thing she didn't like, and she didn't realize, was that she was a halfling. She didn't know what that meant. She thought it was half dwarf, half human, which is, of course, a mole. But she didn't know what a halfling was until she picked the character, and I was like, yeah, it's like a hobbit. I was like, oh, she doesn't like that. But she's okay with it. She's just going to change from a female to a male, because apparently that makes a difference. So yeah, I'd say it was a smashing success. Much better than I thought it would have went. I thought it was going to be really awkward, and they would just sit around. But the adventure really kept them moving. They always had something they could do, and they took to it pretty well. You know, obviously their planning needs a lot of work. We're going to introduce more rules and mechanics, and they're level 2 now, so that's a little bit of complexity. And I'm going to start being a little less lenient with them, but I wanted them to just embrace the whole concept of role-playing, which is very new to them. And so I think they're starting to get it. And so, yeah, I had a whole talk with my mom afterwards, and I was like, you know, there's so many other things and other plans you could have gone with than what you guys did. And she was like, oh, yeah, of course. And I was like, you could have, like, bribed the goblins out front of the cave instead of just killing them. Because, you know, goblins, they're very greedy. They'd take shiny stuff and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you can do that? And I'm like, I kept on telling her, like, you can do anything. You know, which isn't true. There's obviously, you know, we're still trying to operate in some sort of realistic world. But, yeah, you got to keep sort of expanding their like, this is not a video game. This is not a board game. This is a story. And in a story, you can do a lot of things. So I think they'll slowly start to embrace that. All that really mattered for the first session, all that mattered was that they had fun. And I think they definitely all had fun and they want to play again. And so now I got them hooked. So, yeah, that was great. So I highly recommend trying to get some people into Dungeons and Dragons that maybe you wouldn't think would be into it. You know, the start is going to be maybe a little iffy. They're not going to know exactly what's going on or how to play or anything like that, but you know, ease them into it, and it's a brilliant hobby. And I shit on D&D a lot, but it works. It works. So, we're talking about playing on New Year's Day already again, you know, on like Tuesday or something like that. They really want to get back into it. They wanted to do New Year's Eve, but I have a party to go to. I couldn't. So, they really want to jump back into it. And so Lost Mines of Phandelver is levels 1 to 5. There's plenty of content in it. More than I thought. They can fight a dragon and orcs and go into the mountains and all sorts of stuff. And then I'm thinking of leading them into the, I think it's called the Storm King's Thunder, which is another sort of lengthier adventure thing. And it can pick right up from the end of Lost Mines. So it can blend together really well. And yeah, we'll just see where it goes. I think at some point one of them is going to die,
and that'll introduce a bit of a complication. But that's the game. I'm not the kind of DM that's like, oh, you know, no one should ever really die until, like, the big finale. It's like, no, death always needs to be a threat, otherwise it's pointless. But for the first session, no one was going to die. One way or another, no one was going to die. So, yeah, awesome stuff. I was very happy. Obviously, I prefer playing than DMing, but this was a very unique experience, and I'm glad that everyone was very entertained, and I got new people into the hobby. That's awesome. Alrighty. I've talked for very long now. Longest hanging with Mangg ever. But check out the 354 video tomorrow. 1048 video later this week. We got some more Monster Boy and Final Fantasy 12. But, there might not be a roll Mangin again this week. I'm not sure. Could happen. But, yeah, my name is Mangg. This has been Hanging with Mangg. I'll see you fine folks in the next week. Next week. Not in the... Just... Okay.